I really like the word saposhkalach, which means boots. But it's from like the Slavic, and I just really like how it sounds as a word.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz, and I've got an announcement to make. The Book of Life podcast will reach its 12th birthday, or I guess you could say its bat mitzvah, in December 2017. And after that, it will go off the air, possibly permanently. After 18 years as a Judaica librarian at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida, I've moved to Western Massachusetts to join the team at PJ Library, and I will be focusing all my energy on this new adventure for a while. I expect to get back to some kind of podcasting within the next year, and I'm open to suggestions for new directions this could take. When I'm ready to start up again, I will post a Book of Life episode here on this feed to announce my new plans. In the meantime, you can help me get ready for our grand finale. Leave me a voicemail or send me an audio recording with your comment about what the Book of Life has meant to you, about a favorite interview, about new podcasting ideas, or any other thoughts you want to share. Your voice could end up being a part of the show. I'll give you a how-to at the end of today's episode, plus there will be written instructions at bookoflifepodcast.com. Okay, now that the big news is out of the way, let's hear an interview. In June 2017, I visited the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts, where I spoke with Communications Director Lisa Newman and with Christa Whitney, Director of the Center's Wexler Oral History Project. They both offered exciting backstage views of the Yiddish Book Center, and they even helped me clear up an old family linguistic mystery. We'll hear first from Lisa and then from Christa.
I'm Lisa Newman, the Director of Communications at the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts.
So, what is the Yiddish Book Center and what does it do?
The Yiddish Book Center is a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1980 by Aaron Lansky. He was a student at McGill University in Canada, and he was studying Yiddish. At the time, he was 23. And every time a book was assigned in class, 5 or 6 students in the class ran to the library to get the one copy of the book. And it dawned on Aaron that, there is a huge Yiddish-speaking community in Montreal. And he put up a flyer to see if there were books. He got numerous calls in response to the flyer from everywhere, and he took a sabbatical and began to collect the books. At the time, experts estimated that there would be about 70,000 extant books. We have now collected well over 1 million books. Since then, the organization has evolved. We've gone on to preserve and digitize the books that we've collected. We have posted them as the Steven Spielberg Digital Yiddish Library on our website, where they're available to download for free. We have gone on to launch numerous educational programs, from our Steiner Summer Yiddish program to Great Jewish Books for high school students, and 20-somethings have tent. We have adult programs as well. We've got a translation initiative. Only about 2% of the 40,000 titles have been translated. We had been translating that literature in partnership with Yale University Press. We published 10 titles over 10 years, and as somebody pointed out to Aaron, at that rate it'll be another 39,000 years before all the literature is fully translated. So that got us thinking, well, a translation initiative would be good, and we will mentor and train a new generation of translators. And we've been doing that for about 4 years, and it is bearing great fruit. A lot of this work is seeing its way to publication now, and we're discovering all sorts of unknown treasures. We have exhibits, we have public programs, and so we are all about celebrating the culture and exploring it and opening it up.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So I am very excited to be physically at the Yiddish Book Center visiting, and the building itself is very striking. So can you talk about that?
Sure. For a long time, Aaron Lansky was collecting these books, tens and tens and tens of thousands of books, and they were stored in warehouses. At a certain point, it was realized that we needed to have a real Yiddish book center. So the land was purchased here in Massachusetts or adjacent to the Hampshire College campus. Then an architect was needed to build the building, and the center found the perfect person in Alan Moore. And Alan gave great consideration not only to the space, but to what the Yiddish Book Center was all about and what the cultural history and resonance was. So he was inspired by the wooden synagogues from Poland. As you approach the building, the roof lines echo Eastern European architecture, and it looks like a shtetl, a small rural village. People approaching the building think that it's a series of small buildings, yet they're all interconnected. The building itself is 49,000 square feet. Everything was very deliberate for the architect. This bridge, which you walk over, the first entry hall is dark, and then you open these doors, and if you're sitting at the docent desk, as I have done from time to time, everybody's reaction is the same. Their jaw sort of drops because it is light and bright. It is absolutely the unexpected. It's the antithesis of what the exterior looks like, because you think you're going to go into a small, dark space. But Alan wanted to have people enter, make that transition over the bridge through a little bit of darkness and then open up to light, because he felt that the books had been in darkness for too long, and he wanted that sense of light and bright.
That's a beautiful story. Yeah, it's a lot of wood, and that gives you that old-fashioned feel.
And then you walk inside, and there's a timelessness to it, too. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not modern, but yet it doesn't feel like it belongs in any one particular time period. He's an amazing architect, so we feel very privileged to have the building to live in.
Cool. What is the state of Yiddish? Is it a dying language, as people say?
It was the spoken language of Jews before the Holocaust, and most of the native speakers were lost in the Holocaust. It is a language that has a rich cultural history. The literature, in theater, in films, in songs, in music, in cookbooks. Like any other language, it had a culture and a time period. You're sitting here, and adjacent to us are the 18 students in our summer Yiddish program. Testament to the fact that there is an interest, because it allows us to explore an aspect of our Jewish heritage and Jewish culture and Jewish roots. You can't understand Jewishness without understanding that chapter. So is it a dying language? I don't know that we think of it that way. I think we think of it as a language that we would like to make sure that we're able to access in terms of being able to translate, in terms of being able to capture stories like we do with our oral history project when they interview a native Yiddish speaker. To that end, that's sort of our role in it, I guess you would say.
Okay. What do you offer at the Yiddish Book Center for people who don't speak Yiddish?
It's myself included in that. Our exhibits are all English language based. We offer English language programs about aspects of Jewish literature, modern culture, etc. We do have a Yiddish school for adult learners who are interested either in learning the language or in enhancing their skills in the language. It's got a beginner and intermediate and what we call heritage speaker classes, and that's a week-long program.
So we've talked about all the wonderful things that are here at the Yiddish Book Center, but for people who aren't lucky enough to be able to visit, what virtual or long-distance things do you offer?
Great question. So many people who engage with the center engage from around the globe. We redesigned our website about a year and a half ago, worked with a great firm called CogApp in England. On our website, you will find all 12,000 books, which are in Yiddish, available to read online or download for free. We also have articles from Pogenträger, which is our magazine. We have our oral histories. We have an amazing oral history project here, and they post excerpts and the full-length oral histories. The Sammy Rohr Library of Recorded Yiddish Audio, our Francis Brandt Yiddish collection, which is archival recordings. When you go onto the homepage, it says click to open a culture, and I think that says it all.
Okay, great. Tell me about some treasure that is housed here at the Yiddish Book Center.
Let me choose the linotype machine, because that pops into mind. We just walked by it. It's a really great treasure in terms of understanding the Yiddish print shop. It was used at the Daily Forward for probably, 80 plus years until about 1998, and it's how they set the type in lead every day in order to print the newspaper. At the time, most other newspapers had shifted to being produced on computers. Because it was a union shop, they waited until the last union linotype operator retired, and we were able to get the big hulk of a machine. It's huge and it's heavy and it's wonderful. And it was brought up to the Yiddish Book Center so it could be sort of a cornerstone to the Yiddish print shop exhibit that we have here. And just as an aside, it was covered in the Wall Street Journal, and it was the only time that we know of that there was a headline in the Wall Street Journals that was in Yiddish to tell the story of how this was transported.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there a Ladino book center out there somewhere? Do you think there should be if there's not?
There is Professor Devin Narr, who's out on the West Coast, who we think of as the Aaron Lansky of Ladino books.
Okay.
He has been collecting Ladino books, doing an amazing job. It's not as prolific a literature as Yiddish, but there's absolutely an interest in it, and I think that collection will become a library as such sooner than later.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the schmooze, because we are fellow podcasters. So first, let's define schmooze in case any listeners don't know what it means.
To have a conversation, to chat. The Schmooze is the podcast of the Yiddish Book Center. It's a weekly podcast where I have the luxury of speaking to guests, from filmmakers to cookbook authors to writers to translators to students who are engaged in some way with aspects of contemporary Jewish culture or Yiddish culture.
Can you tell me about some guests that stand out in your mind?
I love them all. No. I remember talking to David Nomek, documentary filmmaker, and had just done the film Finding Babel, which is the story of going back and finding the roots of Isaac Babel, the writer's world, through his grandson. And David takes you on an amazing journey. And it was one of those interviews, watching the film and then being able to talk to him about it was really fascinating. Other end of the spectrum, I spoke with Alice Hoffman following her release of The Museum of Extraordinary Things. And what was so interesting about that book for me was the fact that I found out about it because the Wall Street Journal called and they had a fact-checking question. And apparently Alice Hoffman's grandfather had been something of a Yiddish writer, and we had his work in the collection. Alice doesn't speak Yiddish and doesn't read Yiddish, so she had the work translated so that it would inform her understanding of who her grandfather was, and this became integrated into the character. Plus, she's just a great writer, and it was a real pleasure to speak with her. I've had great conversations with Joan Nathan about food and the cultural anthropology of food, and musicians who are playing at Yidstock. I just interviewed Andy Stanton. That was amazing. I mean, he found his way to Dave Terrace at a very young age, and all of that launched him into this incredible career as a musician. And to learn about the earlier musicians, how klezmer and New Yiddish and Jewish music is evolving. And I think that that's true for all of these interviews, is where are those intersections?
Are there any podcasts in Yiddish that you're aware of?
Yes. We had a guest actually on the Schmooze to talk about her podcast. Her name is Sandy Fox, and she has a podcast called Weiberteich. And she is learning Yiddish and was very brave, it seemed, to take on doing a podcast. So doing an interview in a language that doesn't necessarily come easily, but apparently she's very good with the language. From everybody here who has heard her and recommended we invite her on as a guest. It was a great interview.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did she say why she started a Yiddish podcast?
I think she liked the idea of the challenge of it. She was interested in Yiddish. She was becoming a bit of a Yiddishist and thought, why not do a podcast in Yiddish? And she's got a great audience, people who will love listening to it. Yeah. As soon as I learn Yiddish, I'll subscribe.
Awesome. What is your own relationship with Yiddish?
Ever evolving. My grandparents on both sides spoke Yiddish. It's been an amazing experience to work here personally because I realize how much I didn't know about Yiddish and its role in my Jewishness. The literature, I think, is one really great example of it. I'm not a Yiddish speaker or Yiddish reader, unfortunately, but being able to read the work in translation has been enormously exciting for me because I see how it informs my understanding of past generations and also informs my understanding of modern Jewish literature. But it really informs my understanding of reading even, Philip Roth or Grace Paley. All Jewish writers, some writing in Yiddish, some writing in English.
Huh. All right. Do you have a favorite Yiddish word or phrase?
No, we that's a funny one, because I think when I came here I might have thought of a phrase, but now I realize it's hard to extract and just reduce it down to a word. I try to have a larger understanding of the fact that it's absolutely a language that was a living language.
Let me ask you about a Yiddish word I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandma, you know how if you are in the swimming pool or the bathtub too long, your fingers and your toes get all pruny?
Uh-huh.
She called that oiskafutz. Is that a real word, or did she make it up?
If you had let me pop out and ask somebody on the other side of the studio wall.
We could see what we could find out.
Heidi is visiting the center and has a question. And you wanted to know if this word or this
is
phrase,
real.
Yeah.
Oiskafutz.
Whiskefutz. It sounds like a corruption of an actual Yiddish word, is my sense. Sadie, what do you think?
It might be a joke on Oiskaputz.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That Oiskaputz is like made up.
Very well put together.
Yeah.
With a P. Oiskaputz.
Oiskaputz.
That's like, you get all dolled up to go out on the town.
Okay.
So this is a pun of like you're doing the opposite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
That's what I was thinking.
Lisa Newman, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you for coming by. This is a real treat, and harder than I thought to have the microphone turned on me.
Well, you did great.
Thanks.
I'm Christa Whitney, and I direct the Yiddish Book Center's Wexler Oral History Project.
What is the Wexler Oral History Project?
So it's a growing collection of video oral history interviews that we are collecting about Yiddish language and culture.
Tell a little bit about the way you find people to interview, how you go about it, what do you ask them?
Sure. So we have several different interview series within the whole project. One of our series is Yiddish in the Arts, where we talk to a lot of musicians, people involved in theater. We have a series, Yiddish in the Academy, where we're talking to scholars, Yiddish language students, and language teachers. We have a series which might be particularly interesting to you about Yiddish writers and their descendants, where we're learning about sort of the people behind all of the thousands of books on our shelves here. And then we're looking broadly at what is the world in Yiddish, both historically and today. So that leads us in a lot of different directions beyond those discrete interview series.
Do you interview people in Yiddish or in English about Yiddish?
Both. If we're speaking to native Yiddish speakers that are very comfortable in Yiddish, we try to do it in Yiddish whenever possible. There's that added historical value of preserving dialects and native Yiddish speakers. And then there are a lot of people who fit into those categories I mentioned who don't speak Yiddish fluently or are more comfortable in English, and we do that. We've also done a few interviews in other languages when we've done work abroad, so Spanish, Polish, Russian.
Oh, wow. After you record these interviews, what happens to them?
From the beginning, it was really important for us to make these interviews accessible to the public. We know that there aren't a ton of materials accessible about Eastern European Jewish history, particularly first-person narrative. So we have an online portal where you can access the full interviews, just lightly edited for any technical problems. Also, we make shorter videos of different stories. So if you have a specific interest, you can go onto our website and search a specific town you're interested in, or a holiday or topic.
Are you the person who does the interviewing?
I do a lot of them. I have done a few hundred interviews.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's fun about it and what's hard about it, about doing the interviews?
Well, what's fun about it, I guess, is just the privilege that you've done a lot of conversations with people, so you must know this, but just getting to have the conversations, getting to have a couple of hours with someone that's dedicated to listening about their life story is really not only fun, but really feels like an honor. We don't have a lot of space for conversations like that, I feel, in the world today, so that feels very special. The hard part is research, figuring out what is important in different people's lives, what would be the questions that would be most appropriate for each person. And also, usually I'm meeting someone for the first time the day that I'm interviewing them. So that always just figuring out who is sitting, in the chair in front of me and making that connection so that they'll feel comfortable speaking in front of video cameras. Almost without fail, every interview has some amazing gem in it.
Do you tend to interview people who are native Yiddish speakers, people who remember the old country? Do you interview younger people who weren't exposed to that? Who is a target for interviewing?
There is sort of obviously an urgency to interview older people, particularly native Yiddish speakers who were born in the late teens, 20s. We are rushing to interview people in that category. But we also want to look at Yiddish today from different angles. So we often interview our students who come here in the summer. We're curious about what makes a college student dedicate a summer to learning Yiddish. Sort of looking at the range and trying to get different voices to sort of put that mosaic together of the history of Yiddish.
If you were going to do an oral history of me, what would you ask me?
Well, they tend to have a similar arc, so I would start by asking about what you know about your family background, getting a sense of the environment that you grew up in. I would want to know what you were involved in Jewishly in your adult life and figure out how you got there and how has Yiddish played a role in your life or not. What did you think about it growing up? How has it shown up in your life? And then we always like to ask people their opinion of where they see Yiddish in the Jewish world today and if they have any predictions about its future. I always like to ask people that.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you have any predictions about its future?
Well, I think part of the deal with being an oral historian is I've heard so many different opinions that it's hard to land in one answer, because when anyone asks me a question like that, I immediately think of a dozen different answers to that question. I think certainly the spoken language has its biggest future within the Hasidic world. You still hear people talking about whether Yiddish is a dead or dying language, and purely statistically, it's not. It's actually a growing language with the population growth within the Hasidic community. When you look at the secular Yiddish world, I've met a lot of people who are raising their kids in Yiddish. Obviously, it's a small minority compared to the Jewish world, but there are people who are not ultra-Orthodox who are raising their kids in Yiddish today. There are still people writing in Yiddish. All of the summer Yiddish programs are full of students. There are a lot of Yiddish arts going on. It's interesting to see what's going on with Yiddish theater and music today. So there are lots of different threads that you could make predictions about.
What's your own relationship to Yiddish?
I'm not Jewish. I encountered Yiddish for the first time in college. I went to Smith College, which is right next door to the Yiddish Book Center. I was interested in European history, literature going into college, and I had a professor whose specialty is a specific Yiddish writers group in Vilna. He introduces Yiddish kind of in all of his classes, and so I took a Holocaust literature class with him and learned about Yiddish, and then was an intern here at the Yiddish Book Center, took some classes in translation and found some poets I really liked and was sort of propelled in that direction.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Yiddish word or phrase?
I really like the saying genug schon, which means enough already. And word, I really like the word saposhkalach, which means boots. But it's from the Slavic, and I just really like how it sounds as a word.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. Yeah.
In what way does the Wexler Oral History Project help to repair the world? Tikkun Olam.
Wow. I think that oral history in general allows space for different perspectives, and in a way I think that is an important contribution to the world. Certainly I think that giving space for people to share their life experience and stories is special, and as a whole, the collection, I think, allows for a complicated understanding of history that I think is important in the world today.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that I haven't thought to ask you?
Well, if anyone feels like they would want to contribute to the oral history collection, think they know someone they think would be amazing for us to interview, you can get in touch with us at tellyourstory@yiddishbookcenter.org. We're particularly looking for those Yiddish writer stories lately and stories about Yiddish theater. So,
do people need to be local to be interviewed?
We do travel around, so it's always worth just letting us know about you, and then as we travel around, we'll try to get to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what was that phrase? Genug schoen?
Genug schoen, yeah.
So, genug schoen, enough already. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. So
Likewise.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
This is Linda Cass, author of Tassa's Song. I'll be joining you soon on the Book of Life podcast. I'd like to dedicate my episode to my parents because they inspired me my whole life, and I lost them just in the last year.
If you'd like to share a message for the Book of Life's grand finale episode in December 2017, you can call it in by phone at 561-206-2473. Or you can use your computer's microphone to record a voicemail at speakpipe.com/bookoflife. That's speakpipe.com/bookoflife. Or you can record an MP3 yourself and email it to me at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. I'm also happy to receive your written comments by email. I'll read them aloud on the show. Basically, I just want to hear from you. To have your comments included in the December episode, please get them to me by November 30th, 2017. As always, our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.